Tonight, shock and devastation as floods killed dozens of people in Spain. At least 95 people are known to have died after more than a year's worth of rain fell on parts of the southeast. Roads were turned into rivers with bridges, homes and cars swept away by floodwaters.
Oh my God, Steve. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
The car is completely submerged. The car's floating.
These are the moments before a British couple were forced to climb out of their car window as their vehicle was lost to the water. I speak to them live. Also ahead on the programme, could a ceasefire be close in Lebanon? After more strikes killed 19 people in the city of Baalbek, tonight the Lebanese Prime Minister talks up hopes of a deal between Hezbollah and Israel. Plus, another Joe Biden gaffe sparks a row with less than a week to the US election.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Let me be clear, I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
My response to Joe and Kamala is very simple. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans.
Did the comments overshadow Kamala Harris's big moment? We assess the damage to the Democrats. That's all coming up tonight on The World with me, Anna Botting. Hello, good evening. Spain is in shock tonight after flash flooding brought death and despair to the southeast of the country. At least 95 people are dead. Streets have been transformed into rivers with floodwaters knocking down bridges and dragging away cars. In the town of Chiva near Valencia, more than a year's worth of rain fell in just 8 hours. The King of Spain says parts of the country have suffered enormous destruction and 3 days of mourning have now been declared. Well, the region around the Spanish city of Valencia has been worst affected. A state of emergency has been declared in a large part of the region. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins has this report.
In Spain's flood zone, a wire is lowered to a waiting rescuer, neck deep in water. He swims towards a woman sheltered under a doorway. Pulled into the current, they're lifted, finally to safety. This is the aftermath of flash floods that swept across southeast Spain. In Valencia, water described like a tsunami picking up cars. And those who sheltered inside got no more protection. You can hear the screams of care home residents as floodwater, a metre high, gushes through. This is the worst flooding in Spain for almost 30 years. The force of the water enough to wipe out a bridge. In the daylight, this British builder surveying the damage.
We've literally had cars being washed down the riverbed, being swept under, and literally the water was overflowing this bridge here.
In Algemesí, half an hour outside Valencia, the damage is immense. The whole bar is destroyed, the freezers, the chairs, the tables, everything. I've just opened up now and there's nothing that can be salvaged. This woman cries.
102 trabajadores o más.
Us workers have been stuck there, without food, water or anything. Nobody came for us. All of our cars there are write-offs.
As the death toll rises, so does the number of people deployed to help the survivors. More than 1,000 soldiers are operating with emergency services in scenes like these. The country's prime minister's offered his support. 3 days of mourning have been declared. Where the water has receded, the scale of the destruction is clear.
We just had time to grab our phones, not even our ID cards or anything. Everything on the ground floor is destroyed. I've never seen anything like it. At about 2 p.m., the water started coming in.
These people have no choice but to abandon their ruined homes. This is what they've left behind. the wreckage of lives devastated without warning. And it isn't over yet. The water's still rising and more storms are forecast. This devastation may just be the start.
Siobhan Robbins there. So a year's worth of rain in some areas in as little as 8 hours. What has caused this extreme weather in Spain and what can we expect over the coming days? Our science correspondent Thomas Moore has this.
It is almost impossible to imagine quite so much rain in such a short time. 491 millimetres, just short of half a metre, fell in some areas around Valencia, according to the Spanish Weather Service. That's a year's worth of rain in just 8 hours. The weather system that caused the flooding is not unusual on the eastern side of the Iberian Peninsula at this time of year. Winds flowing over the still warm waters of the Mediterranean picked up lots of moisture, then mixed with a pool of cold air sitting high in the atmosphere over the Valencia region. This allowed huge storm clouds to develop with intense downpours. The low-pressure storm also ground to a halt, surrounded on all sides by high atmospheric pressure. Its path was blocked. The heaviest rain fell on just a smaller area and it was quickly overwhelmed. Now, climate change will make storms more severe. The atmosphere is currently just over a degree warmer than it was in pre-industrial times, holding around 7% more moisture. But we are currently on track for more than 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century.
We can see that we're not ready for the storms that we're receiving now in our cities. They are not built to withstand this amount of water, this amount of destruction, this amount of power, and it's going to be worse in the future. This is an urgent call to adapt our cities where we can.
Spain has endured climate extremes in recent years, with a severe drought in the northeast forcing authorities to ration tap water. The dry heat has also hard-baked the soil surface, so water runs off rather than being absorbed. And all that rain had nowhere to go.
And we'll head to the region shortly to get the very latest from Valencia. In the meantime, let us head to the Middle East now, and reports that a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah could come in a matter of hours. That is according to Lebanon's caretaker prime minister, who says he held constructive conversations with America's envoy. Well, meanwhile, today, Israel launched a series of airstrikes on the ancient city of Baalbek in the east of the country. Lebanon's health ministry says 19 people, including 8 women, were killed there. Israeli forces had ordered people in the city to evacuate. Around 80,000 people live there. Well, as Israel expands its operations in Lebanon, the situation remains dire in Gaza. Israel's decision to ban the UN agency responsible for getting almost all aid into the Strip has been widely criticised. The UN Secretary-General has said the move could have devastating consequences. Here, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has also criticised the decision. The head of the UN, Antonio Guterres, has warned the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza will deepen. Israel's Prime Minister claims the relief group has links to Hamas. So let's take a look at the details then. UNRWA stands for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. It was established back in 1949 to provide healthcare, food and education to Palestinian refugees. Their operations are spread across Gaza and the West Bank, including in East Jerusalem, Syria, Lebanon and Jordan. It serves almost 6 million refugees. Let's return now to our top story. For many people, the sheer level of rainfall in southeast Spain around Valencia came as a complete shock. Karen Loftus from Britain recorded the moments that her car became submerged in floodwaters.
Our car is completely submerged. I've got water coming in at my feet. The car's floating. I'm thinking about getting in that lorry, getting out and getting in the lorry. The car's a write-off, absolute write-off.
Well, Karen climbed out of her car window and was saved by a lorry driver before her own vehicle was swept away. It joins us now from a refuge I think you found, Karen. And, you know, thank goodness you are safe when so many are not.
Yeah, it's been an absolute nightmare situation. We were very lucky we decided to get out of our car. We've only made it to Valencia so far. We've got another couple of hours to go, but we tried today, but there's no trains and roads are shut. So if we hadn't made that decision, I think we couldn't get out of the door. The door was shut. It was the pressure of the water. We had to climb out the window.
Well, you were on the move, weren't you? You'd been travelling, so presumably
Yes.
hadn't heard the warnings. I know some people are very concerned that the warnings weren't given strongly enough. You know, talking to people where you are, did people feel they had enough notice about this and the quantity of water that fell?
Yeah, we were really shocked. We knew we were in for some rain, but we didn't get the civil alert until it probably was about 5 or 6 hours too late, frankly, for us. If we had known earlier, there is no way that we would have travelled. No way that we would have travelled. I've never been in such rain in my entire life. It was scary and quick, really, really quick.
Well, we see the pictures, don't we, of roads becoming rivers. You've experienced it. You talk about it being quick. How did it happen?
Well, we were just on the A7, just north of Valencia, just driving along. All of a sudden, all of the traffic came to a halt. We then heard that a bridge had gone down not far in front of us. Lorries had been swept away. And within 10 minutes, the water was, as you saw on my husband's video, and we were just, people were absolutely panic stricken. So it happened so quickly. We made the decision to get out of the car. I didn't know at 62 I could climb out of a car window into raging torrents, but I did. And then we managed to get across and over a big wall onto the other side, where a fantastic Moroccan lorry driver called Fadil picked us up. And he was so brave. He absolutely saved us. I don't know what we would have done without him. He had a huge articulated lorry and he basically drove through about 5 foot of water and we managed to escape. But I genuinely don't know what would have happened to us if he hadn't have been there.
Yes, well, that was my next question. How deep was the water around you and was it still rising? Of course, going into an articulated lorry, you know, gets you off the ground, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
Explain the geography of this area, if you can. You've got presumably hills, you've got the River Turia, which flows into the sea just south of Valencia, the floodplain, and all of this, a great basin for water to collect and then start, you know, flowing downhill.
Yes, it's a very rural area where we were, so lots of fields. So we were on a motorway, but the fields were it was just a torrent coming off of the fields, which just filled up the motorway because it had concrete barriers either side. So it acted like a funnel for the water to flow down. So, and on the other side of us was a deep ravine. So we were really worried we were going to be washed into this ravine. Had Fadil not let us, two soaking wet Brits, get in his lorry and give us some water and chocolate biscuits, I don't know what we would have done. It's just horrendous.
It sounds absolutely petrifying. Now you explain you could be washed, you know, literally away. And in terms of the reaction in Spain, we know 3 days of mourning have been announced.
Yes,
you know, 95 dead. You know, so far there's so much clearing up to be done. People, you know, hopefully. Well, you never know if more people will be found. What is the sense there? What's the feeling there at the moment?
It's very quiet, which is not like Spain at all. People are very reflective, and people have been the people we've met have been, as all Spanish people we encounter are, very kind to us, very generous, helping us out. The taxi driver today was trying to get us through, but the traffic was at a complete standstill today in Valencia. There was no going anywhere today. So we managed to find ourselves a room for the night, but we haven't got anything with us, so we're just going to hunker down here and hopefully we might be able to get out tomorrow. But just the scenes of devastation and water running through Valencia, I've never seen any. We love Valencia, I've never seen anything like it.
Well, months, they're talking about years, aren't they, to rebuild and put this all back. And for you, I hope you get home safely. Stay safe. Obviously, I think more rain is forecast, isn't it? Karen Loftus, sharing your story there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more then on the situation on the ground. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, is in Alganesi and sent us this report.
So we're here in the town of Algemesí, which is around half an hour outside Valencia, and it's this area which is some of the worst hit by these flash floods. And you can see that here, the whole of the town is covered in this thick layer of mud, which absolutely stinks. And in some places, it's as high as halfway of my boot. It's gone into people's houses. It's gone into people's cars. And we're told by people that we've spoken to here that they had absolutely no warning, that they heard about the situation on the television. When they looked out, the water was already rushing down the street here. Now, in some places, they said it was almost 2 meters high here. And the strength of that water, some people in this flood zone have described it as like a tsunami, and that it got the cars that were in the street and tumbled them on top of each other. Now here, those cars have actually been removed, but we've seen similar scenes in Valencia and on the highway outside Valencia as well, where cars have been tossed around as if they were toys. And still here, it's late at night, but we're seeing people coming through. The cleanup is continuing, and you can see what the water's brought with it. So here, you can see that there are branches and debris, a bonnet of a car there, mud, more boxes, chairs just abandoned in the middle of the street there, whether that someone tried to get them out before or they got washed down, or that this is stuff that they pulled out that's already been damaged, I don't know. But what they're dealing with, we're told, is one of the worst floods in Spain in 30 years. Actually, here people have told us it's the worst flood that they've ever seen. Around 1,000 soldiers are out trying to help people who have been affected. In some places, the rain is still falling, and there is a fear that when the water really does properly recede, the full scale of the damage will be revealed.
Siobhan Robbins with that update on those devastating floods around Valencia in Spain. Well, do stay with us on The World. Coming up, we'll have more on the Middle East as Israel steps up its attacks across its borders. Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister suggesting he is optimistic a ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel is close to being agreed.
We're rolling.
Welcome to The World.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong, and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. You know, it takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel like just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, where is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant.
I say Bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, let's return to the Middle East now. Reports that a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah could come in a matter of hours. That, according to Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister, who says he held constructive conversations with America's envoy, and a leak from an Israeli broadcaster which published a draft ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, today, Israel launching a series of airstrikes on the ancient city of Baalbek. Lebanon's health ministry saying 19 people, including 8 women, were killed. Israeli forces had ordered people in the city to evacuate. Around 80,000 people live there. Well, let's get the latest then on both those. Ivor Bennett joining me now from Beirut. So bombing continues, Ivor, but on this ceasefire draft published today, which suggests that Israeli troops could pull out within 7 days, the US seems to be cautioning against it. But what are people saying there?
Yeah, so we did know that there was this big diplomatic push to try and secure a ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel ahead of the US election next week. But news that it could come within hours is unexpected. This has come from Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati, following a call he had earlier today with the White House official who's leading or mediating the talks between the two sides, Amos Hochstein. We haven't had anything official from the Israeli side yet, only that the public broadcaster there, Kan, has published a copy of what it says is the draft agreement that's being discussed. What we know for sure is that Amos Hochstein and another senior US official will be in Israel tomorrow to hold more talks. It's being reported that what they're pushing for is a 60-day truce that would hope that would allow them to implement the UN Security Council resolution that was agreed back in 2006. It's known as 1701. It would see Hezbollah fighters withdraw from the south of Lebanon around the Israeli border to be replaced by Lebanon's official armed forces, with the ultimate aim of allowing displaced residents from both sides of the border to move back to their homes. The big question is will Hezbollah agree to it as well? Well, we did hear from their new leader, Naim Qassem, today in his first televised address since being elected to the top job yesterday. There was the usual rhetoric that you might expect, pledging to continue the war against Israel and continue the work of his predecessor, Hassan Nasrallah. But he also appeared to leave the door open to a truce with Israel, saying the group would agree to a ceasefire within certain parameters if Israel wanted to stop the war. But I have to stress that nothing concrete has been agreed yet, and the White House tonight is urging caution. They say that the reports and the drafts do not reflect the current state of negotiations.
Yes, interesting, and we'll certainly keep a close eye on that. In the meantime, of course, despite that diplomatic push, airstrikes are continuing today, hitting Baalbek. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. Heavy airstrikes in the city, the ancient city or around it of Baalbek, which is in the east of Lebanon, quite some way from the southern region that's borne the brunt of the Israeli onslaught. And so I think that's significant because it shows that whilst there are these diplomatic talks going on, Israel is still expanding its campaign against Hezbollah. The city of Baalbek is home to some very ancient Roman ruins, 3,000 years old. It's a UNESCO heritage site. The wider region is known as a Hezbollah stronghold. Ahead of the strikes, Israel issued an evacuation order to residents. That sparked scenes of chaos and panic. Tens of thousands of people trying to flee all at the same time. Some of them have already been displaced once during this war. They fled from the south to Baalbek. Now they're having to flee again. And some of the areas they're trying to reach are already full with displaced people because so many people within the country have had to leave their homes as a result of this conflict. But if these talks of a truce being imminent are true, well, these airstrikes could cease quite soon. But I must stress that this is only, of course, surrounding the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. No sign of any breakthrough in the talks between Israel and Hamas regarding the situation in Gaza.
Ivor, updating us there from Beirut. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm joined now by Merav Michaeli, former leader of the Israeli Labour Party, a current member of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee. Welcome to you. First of all, Israel's public broadcaster publishing what it says is a draft of a Lebanon ceasefire proposal. It would mean Israeli forces pulling out within 7 days of a deal, full implementation over 60 days. The US cautioning against it. But do you see any hope of a rapid ending to the war in the north in Lebanon?
The majority of Israelis want an end to this war. We want our hostages back, first and foremost, and I know that you have been with a family of hostages in Israel, and you know how deeply everybody's hurting over those 101 people who've been there for over a year now. So we want to see an end to this war. Hezbollah started this war completely unprovoked by Israel, only to identify with the Palestinians. He's been fighting Israel over a year now, bombarding Israel, and people don't realize this. We are being bombarded on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. We have 80,000 people misplaced from their homes within Israel for over a year now. So yes, we would very, very much like to see an end to this war. But we need to know that we are safe. We need to know that we're not being penetrated from the north. We need to know that that they don't keep shooting at us. Hezbollah never respected, never agreed to 1701, the agreement that was the end of the
2006 war, which would push Hezbollah back past the Litani River, and that was never enforced, is what you're saying.
Exactly. They never agreed to it. It was never enforced. We will not go back to the same routine of being...
1701 is in this ceasefire agreement. I mean,
it needs to be implemented this time. It needs to be enforced. It needs to be such that will really assure Israel's security. Anna, with your permission, I think there is one thing that is very, very difficult for people in Europe, in Britain, is very difficult for them to understand. Israel is tiny. It's 2 hours a drive from east to west. It's a 10-hour drive from north to south. That's all. And we have those terrorists on our borders. And they've been slaughtering us, and they have been bombarding us constantly. And so when we talk about security, it is not something theoretical. And when you hear all those leaders, of course, starting from Iran, saying that they are out to destroy the state of Israel and to eliminate the people living there, they mean business. So we have to protect ourselves.
I was in Tel Aviv for the anniversary of October the 7th. We started the morning with a rocket attack from Hamas. We then had a ballistic missile sent by the Houthis in Yemen. And at the end of the day, rockets fired from Hezbollah from Lebanon. But the world has had enough of seeing children die in Gaza, of neighbourhoods of displaced people being attacked, of hospitals being besieged, of people without adequate food or water, with reports by the United Nations that it will take 350 years to rebuild Gaza. Enough is enough.
Do you know why nobody speaks about rebuilding Syria, for instance? Because the power that brought to the destruction of Syria is still in power there. And the power that has brought to the destruction of Gaza, which is Hamas, is still in power there. we have to understand that Hamas are not people who want the two-state solution. I am a head of a party. I used to be a head of a party that is the party of the late Yitzhak Rabin, who brought about the two-state solution, who still am fighting for it. But Hamas do not recognize the state of Israel or its right to exist. These are not people with whom you can, and they have been oppressing their own people. When we talk about humanitarian aid to Gaza, Israel is bringing in tons and tons and tons of humanitarian aid on a daily basis. It's been stolen by Hamas. The same way all the resources they have been getting for 15 years have been stolen to accumulate just arms in order to attack Israel.
And build the tunnels. I know the accusations. You talk about Yitzhak Rabin.
It's not accusation, this is reality.
You talk about Yitzhak Rabin, famously of the Oslo Accords, himself assassinated. And yet you currently have a leader in place in Israel who does not believe in the two-state solution.
Sure.
So what does he want for the Palestinians? He doesn't want them to have a homeland. So people are suspicious about what he's doing in northern Gaza. What do you think the intention is for northern Gaza from the current government in Israel?
Well, thankfully, he said on record that there's no intention of settling in northern Gaza, only in maintaining the border,
So
which is the international
buffer zone,
border.
though, do you think? Is this push back the Palestinians to create a buffer zone? Is that the idea?
Listen, I am really the number one opposition to Netanyahu in Israel, have been forever. I'm the only one on the current opposition who's never agreed to sit with him under any circumstances. And one of the things that I disagree with him on is what the day after in Gaza should look like. And I think there should be we should use that as a step one towards a trajectory towards a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We should get the Palestinian Authority as part of the new government that will be formed in order to replace Hamas in Gaza.
So you say that the Israelis are feeding those in Gaza, but the main mechanism for that was UNRWA, the United Nations aid organisation, with thousands of members, some of whom had been accused of being involved in October the 7th last year. Who will feed the Palestinians if you don't have that mechanism in place?
Well, first and foremost, they haven't been accused. Even UNRWA itself said that 9 of its employees were physically, and they're on film, seen. They are ones who took, they did not go over the border for a field trip. They have murdered, they have raped, they have abducted and kidnapped the hostages who are still there.
I accept that, but you pull thousands of people who are working in Gaza and replace it with what?
No, first of all, so UNRWA itself admits it, but it has never apologized for it, nor has it said anything about maybe rethinking the way it's recruiting its workers, maybe rethinking the way it's managing its workers and making sure nothing like that happens.
Okay,
I understand. How
do you get the aid to people in the Palestinian areas if you pull the only organisation that actually sufficiently does it?
So first of all, and again, we need to understand, UNRWA, even those who are not terrorists and are not part of Hamas, are abducted by Hamas. Hamas actually is taking everything and the facilities it's been using UNRWA's facilities. It's been imposing on its workers and just taking the food from them.
So I understand the accusation against it, but there's nothing to fill the whole of it.
The food the food will continue to go in, and then the legislation first and foremost means that in Jerusalem, the Palestinians in Jerusalem will now be dealt with and be taken care of by the Jerusalem municipality, which, they're living under it.
With the best will in the world, we're not worried about people in Jerusalem. We're worried about people in Gaza getting adequate aid.
The humanitarian aid that's coming in will continue to come in, but we need to work towards a mechanism that does not steal it away from them, but is giving it to them. And UNRWA is something that Israel cannot trust today, and especially when, as I said, is subjected to Hamas. So we need to work. I'm telling you seriously.
Yeah.
First of all, in general, and when you zoom out a little bit, UNRWA is something that has to close down completely because it has been perpetuating the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and making sure that there is no two-state solution.
I have a final question for you. Looking to the next year, do you have any optimism that the wars currently underway in that region will be over?
First of all, I believe that optimism is a political choice. And so I have to be optimistic. The late Prime Minister Golda Meir once said that a Jew does not have the privilege of not being an optimist. I am working in order to finish these wars. I am in Israel, I am fighting against Netanyahu, against his wrong policies, in order to finish those wars, to bring back the hostages and to rebuild the future for Israel and for our neighbors. I believe it is possible. Let's work for it together.
Merav Michaeli, good to have you here. Opposition leader, I think that's the easiest description for you right now, isn't it? Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, stay with us on The World. Coming up, we will return to the situation in Spain. Officials in the country say at least 95 people are now known to have died as 3 days of mourning are declared following the flash flooding there.
Are you ready to make your voices heard?
As America votes,
Win, 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 win.
Get ready for an election night like no other.
join our team stateside
as we get close to the action
and bring you the results as they arrive.
With full reaction and comprehensive analysis,
guiding you through the night.
in an election which could have huge consequences around the world.
America Votes, Election Night Live.
Get the full story first on Sky News.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, let's return now to the devastating flash floods in Spain, which have killed at least 95 people. The region around the city of Valencia has been badly impacted by that flash flooding, resulting in those deaths. A state of emergency has been declared in a large part of the region as a year's worth of rain fell in just 24 hours. Well, all of these areas recorded rainfall of more than 460 millimetres in just 24 hours. The highest recording was in Xiva, west of Valencia, which saw almost half a metre of rain over the period of a few hours. Well, this was the scene earlier today, video released by the Spanish authority showing people being airlifted to safety by helicopter. A huge rescue operation still underway, with emergency services and troops also using drones to search for the missing. Well, this video shows just how the water has risen in some areas. You can see a woman and her dog, indeed, being rescued. With the water up at waist height, the rescue worker touches down. Shortly afterwards, he makes his way over to the woman and the dog, and then they are safely airlifted to safety, clutching her animal, as you can see, and indeed the rescuer too. Well, 3 days of mourning have been declared. Here is Spain's Prime Minister.
Dozens of villages have been flooded, roads are cut off, bridges have been destroyed by the violence of the waters. And firstly, I would like to, on behalf of the government of Spain, and I believe on the whole of Spanish society, convey all of our solidarity and condolences to the families of those who have died in this tragedy in the region of Valencia and Castilla-La Mancha, and also to those who are still looking for lost ones. Spain weeps with all of you.
And join me now from Xeresa, close to Valencia. Terrible pictures, Adam, of the force of the water overnight and afterwards. What is the scene where you are as Spain mourns its dead?
Yeah, it was an extraordinary series of scenes that this region coped with, of parks like this, roads just being turned into rivers, and as you saw in many places where the mud was churned up into that deep brown water just gushing through these roads, and of course very troubling scenes of people being swept away, huge amounts of damage being done. The remarkable thing about these flash floods, as the name implies, is look around us now. The water comes and then it goes, but often what it leaves behind is utter devastation. The number of deaths is now standing at 95, but the Spanish government has given very strong indications that it thinks that number will rise as over the next 24 hours it continues to search for survivors or victims. Hundreds of soldiers have been assigned to that task. As you heard there, Pedro Sanchez going on national television saying that the nation is weeping. And his defence minister mobilising specialist forces, but saying that they do expect to find more people who have died in these floods. Now, help has been offered by neighbouring countries, by Portugal, by Germany, Italy, indeed by the European Union, all of these institutions offering help and also professing shock. But I think there will be plenty who look at this and say this is yet another demonstration of the influence of climate change, a horrendous demonstration of it. By the way, this will be probably the worst storm in Spain's living memory, but not the worst floods even in the 2020s. Remember, just back in 2021, where nearly 200 people in Germany died when there were dreadful rainstorms, floods that hit that region. And it was the same story where you had colossal amounts of water rose up, devastated areas, and then fell away again. So I think Spain is coming to terms with this, but has a state of shock. This region of Valencia, very agricultural region. The farmland here supplies citrus fruits to Europe and indeed the whole world. And a lot of that farmland has been devastated. So the economy is going to take a big hit from this. But I think the main thought now is to look for more survivors, to see if there is anybody out there who has swept away and has managed to stay alive. But of the people who have died so far, almost all of them are in this region in Valencia, a couple in a town just south of Madrid, and one in Malaga. And that, of course, was a British man, a 71-year-old, who went into the water, was brought out and has died of hypothermia. The Foreign Office has issued now travel advisories to British travellers, telling them to watch the weather forecast. And it is worth saying that while this region, it is hoped, has had the worst of it, there is now a separate red alert issued for the south of Spain, for Cadiz area, in fact for the regions coming near to Gibraltar. It's expected that the worst of that weather, if it hits, will go to really sparsely populated bits of Spain. That is a hope. But Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister, saying that the country may not yet be through the worst of this, that these apocalyptic storms that hit here in Valencia may yet find another target in Spain.
So much work after flooding like this, and clearly those warnings of more rainfall, very concerning for people. Adam, much appreciate that update. Thank you very much indeed. Now, with less than 6 days to go until Election Day in the United States, Kamala Harris's campaign has been dealt a setback. But it wasn't rather down to Team Trump. It was an unenforced error from the Democrats and her current boss, President Biden, describing Donald Trump's supporters as garbage. The timing of the comments couldn't have been worse, coming on the night Harris delivered what has been billed as her final pitch to voters. Well, today she sought to distance herself from the comments, saying she would govern for all if she won the presidency. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has this report.
It was supposed to be her night.
Good evening, America!
Kamala Harris delivering a closing argument. The message, choose me over Donald Trump. Cohesion over chaos.
On day one, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list.
Harris didn't directly address the controversy over Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, but lurking behind her in the White House, President Biden did. This on a video call.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Harris has been trying to extend a hand to Trump's voters. Now she's cleaning up Biden's mess.
I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. I believe that the work that I do is about representing all the people, whether they support me or not.
Harris will spend election night at Howard University, her alma mater in Washington, D.C. It's a historically black college. Students here divided on whether Biden's gaffe will impact voting. Do you think it's a shame he said what he said?
There's a layer of truth to it, I would say, but still, I mean, it's something that I wish my president wouldn't have said.
I don't know if it'll necessarily change the outcome, but I think it definitely does add into the way that politics has changed in the United States within the last 2 elections, where it's just this name calling and just rhetoric that's hurtful.
And you could say moves like that is the reason why Kamala's running and not Biden, because that's not a thought out move. That's not a chess move. There's validity in having emotion, but that doesn't mean that your emotion should dictate how you move.
So far this race, Kamala Harris hasn't lent too heavily into the historic nature of her candidacy, but spending election night here at Howard is a reminder of her roots and an attempt to keep this campaign on message. But her opponent, sensing an opportunity, is now trying to capitalise on Biden's remarks.
He called them garbage. You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. You just
The whole theme of Harris's campaign has been unity. But as this race enters its dying days, she can't escape the reality. Politics here is more divisive, the rhetoric more dismal than ever. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Washington.
Well, Martha joins me now. A hard graft, isn't it, in the final few days? But is Kamala Harris struggling to win support when it comes to undecided voters?
Yeah, Kamala Harris looking notably tired on the campaign trail today, which is easy to imagine in this final stretch. But as you say, 6 days to go. This is now crunch time in not only trying to win over undecided voters, but most people will have already made up their mind. It's about turning them out to the ballot box. Those voters who might be leaning her way, but they need that extra little push over the line. I think case in point is I spent some time earlier today at Howard University. Not only is it historically black university, it's also Kamala Harris's alma mater. It's the very place that she should be able to rely on pretty steadfast support. But I spoke to a number of students, and a proportion of them said that they still hadn't made up their mind. One of those was saying it was because of the Israel-Gaza situation, but a couple of them said they simply hadn't heard enough from Kamala Harris, that she hadn't spoken to them sufficiently, that she hadn't let them know what her policies were. So I think with 6 days to go, it's about speaking to those voters. It's about getting those voters to the poll. They all said that they could be decided. They just need that final extra push.
Martha, live risk there. Thank you very much indeed. Well, today, both candidates, Trump and Harris, are speaking in the swing state of North Carolina, where the vote appears to be, quite literally, on a knife edge. Latest polling shows that Trump is narrowly ahead with 49% of average vote share, while Harris trailing just about with 48.5%. Well, I'm joined now by Frank Pierce, a Democratic candidate running for Congress in North Carolina. Welcome to you. Clearly indicative of how tight it is in North Carolina that both candidates are there. Tell me, do you believe the polls at the moment?
For which state? It just depends on the state that you're talking about. I think that she's going to win the state of North Carolina like Barack Obama did in 2008, just based on turnout. The numbers that are coming out to vote are very high. And in this state, a woman's right to choose is very important to a lot of people that are here and a lot of businesses. So that is on the ballot this November, and we're behind her for president.
Well, early voting has been massive, hasn't it, across a number of states. But this time, the Republicans trying to get their vote out early too. How do you know you're getting the votes who are coming in early?
It just depends. Like for my district, I was the only candidate that was traveling across the district talking to people. I am from my district. I grew up here, know how to reach out to people. But really, it's just because you have Republicans showing up early does not mean that they're all voting for President Trump. I believe he's only getting probably 80% of the Republican vote. Back in 2020, he averaged about 90. I think it's lower since then because of who has come out and endorsed her for presidency. So in North Carolina, she has a viable chance to win this state and be the first woman president of the United States.
And yet her big moment yesterday, you saw outside the White House, the suggestion that 75,000 people were there watching her, effectively saying, I welcome all comers. I want everyone to back me. I'll work with everybody. And then Joe Biden goes around and calls Trump supporters garbage. I mean, should he just, disappear for the last week? Do you think it's not helpful to her?
I think the president should do what he thinks he should do. As a person who is running for Congress, I don't want to tell anyone else what they should and should not do. On my campaign trail, I do very little talking about presidential policies. I talk about my policies, but essentially it's about her race. And, as long as she's getting out there and talking to people, those are the things that matter. And as long as she's doing that, she's shown up here in North Carolina a couple of times. She also sent Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, who in this state has tremendous support still for his presidency. So those things are helping her along the way and hopefully push her over the top.
Well, tell us then, when you're knocking on doors and meeting people in your congressional district, fighting for your own seat, what are the issues on the doorstep for you? What are the big ones?
So I am the #1 gerrymandered district in the country. So it is very tough, but it's just talking to people and listening. You know, when I was a kid, my grandmother, who grew up in East Essex, actually taught me, you know, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I just listen. I show up and I ask them questions and say, what is important to you? I have 8 counties that are so vastly different. I have 1 county that does not have cell phone service in 90% of the county. So their needs are a lot different than my other counties. So it's just listening and saying, hey, I'm going to be here for this, and actually showing up, which is a huge problem in American politics, is people actually showing up for you and listening and being there for you to talk to. And that's what a change I want to bring forward, because I grew up, I've had a job since I was 11 years old. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. So, you know, being the person who is a working class person, you make a difference in people's lives just by showing up. And that's been my whole campaign motto.
Well, you mentioned abortion, which is the strong point clearly for Kamala Harris, the downsides for her, border issues, inflation, cost of living. Presumably that's a big concern where you are too.
It is. So inflation, we are the best recovery country in the world, and we know that. The inflation started back during the pandemic, but it has steadily declined since then. The border issues, we had a border bill on the table. The Republicans did not pass it, and it had things that they wanted in it. It was almost 98% theirs. But it's just having those conversations. We continue to, both sides, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, just point fingers at the other sides. And we need to start having conversations to make a difference, and making sure that we're not forgetting the Palestinian people as well as we're going into Congress.
Apologies to butt in there. Frank Pierce in North Carolina, fighting for his congressional district there. Thank you very much indeed. That is all from tonight's edition of The World. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with Sky News at 10, the very latest on the flooding in Spain and the budget.